Welcome everybody to tonight's Getting Up to Speed to Lead training number 2 about the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment, what we at Green Amendments for the Generations refer to as a Green Amendment, the Connecticut's version of a Green Amendment, but in Connecticut, it's the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment. This training is really about telling your story and how to most effectively communicate with governmental leaders as well as other leaders in your community about the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment, why this is such a powerful, important level of protection that can and should be secured for the communities of the state of Connecticut. We have a really great team of organizations that have come together in sponsorship of this training. The Green Amendments for the Generations, of course, Connecticut NOFA, the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Connecticut, has really been at the forefront of this movement since its inception in the state of Connecticut, very notably in the leadership of Kim Stoner that we're going to hear from tonight. C3M, the Connecticut Climate Crisis Mobilization, has been very engaged since the beginning days of the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment movement. And then there is this really powerful alliance of organizations and activists that have come together under the name Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment Alliance, of which C3M, CT NOFA, and Green Amendments for the Generation are all members as well. But this is a really powerful coming together of individuals and organizations that really want to offer this training to take us to a next level of communication when it comes to advancing the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment. Tonight's training is scheduled to be about an hour and a half. If we can end a little bit early, we will, but we wanted to make sure we made enough space and time because we have a really robust agenda. I want to remind folks that we had a training number 1 that really dug in very deeply. It was about the same length of time, about that hour and a half, and it dug in deeply on what a Green Amendment is, what the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment will accomplish by having the Green Amendment elements, how it will make a difference for environmental protection and environmental justice and climate protection in the state of Connecticut. And also we dug in on frequently asked questions. What are they and how do you answer them? So hopefully you were either a participant in that training or you had an opportunity to go back and take a look at it before this training number 2. But if you didn't, that's okay. You can always go back later. It is recorded. It's on the Green Amendments for the Generations Action Platform, and we've shared it in other ways as well. So people can go back and review that and refresh your recollection, because this really is quite an important subject, and there are a lot of aspects of it that people are just now learning. So I am Maya Van Rossum. I am the leader and founder of the Green Amendments for the Generations movement and organization, and I am on this agenda doing the welcome and introduction. Next, we are going to, second on the agenda, we're going to be hearing from David Pringle, who I will introduce shortly, but he's going to be talking about how to talk effectively with government officials and others about the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment. Nicole Ilanovich is going to talk about the importance of how you integrate your own story into this communications and into this messaging to really do the most compelling presentation when you're talking with government officials and others about the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment. We're then going to hear from Kim Stoner, who again is really the force initially behind reaching out to us so we could work in tandem to bring the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment to the state of Connecticut. And she's really been out at the forefront since the inception, making this happen. After we have these presentations, we're going to have some breakout rooms where you're going to be able to go practice your elevator speech, how you're going to pitch the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment to leaders and government officials, and even have some practice answering questions that a legislator posed to you. We're going to break you out into 3 groups. You're going to have a facilitator that's going to sort of lead you through this exercise. Okay. When you're in those breakout rooms, your facilitator, they will remind you, but your facilitator is going to be your legislator or government leader or community leader that you think you might be pitching out in the real world. So when you get into that space, right, you try to put yourself in that dynamic so you can really experience what it's going to be like when you have to talk about the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment for reals. And your facilitators are there in their role as government officials or leaders, are going to be posing questions to you and engaging with you in that role. After our breakout time, we're all going to come back together. Our facilitators are going to share some thoughts and some advice based on what they experience with you in the breakout rooms. And then you're also all going to have your opportunity to share your thoughts about what you experienced, to ask questions of our presenters, to get some good advice, or perhaps to share some good advice of your own that you've learned in your journey of activism, or perhaps that came to you during a breakout session. So our speakers are going to be threefold. Again, I mentioned them briefly. David Pringle. David Pringle has actually been a leader in the Green Amendments for the Generations movement in the state of New Jersey, but also really assisted us in nationwide efforts to advance the Green Amendment movement. Nicole Ilanovich has been a key leader in the state of New Mexico. She also serves on the Green Amendments for the Generations board, and she too has helped us spread this message and support communities like yours nationwide. And then again, Kim Stoner has been the key leader in the state of Connecticut in advancing this critical movement. I do want to acknowledge, right, we're going to have Molly Atz, who's with Green Amendments for the Generations, is going to be joining us shortly. She's going to be one of the breakout facilitators. And then behind the scenes, we have Bridget Brady and Peter Tran, without whom none of this would be happening, because they're back there running the technology. Bridget is sharing the links and will be helping me monitor the Q&A that we will be asking you to place in the chat at the end of the session. Before we jump in, because I know some people might end up having to leave early, I just wanted to put out there 3 places for you to go for continuing information. The Green Amendments for the Generations organization has a Connecticut-specific website, ctgreenamendment.org. The Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment Alliance has a complementary website. The two really work in tandem, working with different kinds of information and activism opportunities, but both of them are valuable resources. And that's www.ct-era.org. And then Green Amendments for the Generations actually has an online action platform that operates like social media, where you can engage real time with others in the Green Amendment movement, either in the Connecticut community you'll find on that platform, or activists that are working on Green Amendment initiatives in other states nationwide. So I encourage you to check out all of those resources and to sign up for that action platform, because when we have hot news on something that's happening in Connecticut or beyond, that's the first place that we post it. Okay, so want to remind everybody, what does the language that we are anticipating in the state of Connecticut for the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment, what does it say? Now, I want to remind all that we have not had the proposal yet for 2024. There are some ongoing conversations with potential legislative champions, so there might be some adjustments to this language. But for the most part, I think it's pretty solid, and certainly all the concepts we expect to be in any final language. So let's just go through it so you have this in your mind as you're going into the training. The State of Connecticut Declaration of Rights, Article 1, shall be amended to add Section 21. Each person of the state of Connecticut shall have an individual right to clean and healthy air, water, soil, and environment, a stable climate, a stable and safe climate, and self-sustaining ecosystems. The state, including any political subdivisions thereof, shall not infringe upon these rights and shall protect these rights equitably for all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, tribal membership status, gender, socioeconomics, or geography. The state shall conserve, improve, and protect Connecticut's natural resources and lands, including but not limited to It's air, waters, flora, fauna, soils, climate, and ecosystems for the benefit of all the people, including present and future generations. And then we're hoping for some really important little bit of legalese that will provide a critical element of protection to the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment. And that is something along the lines that these rights stated are inherent, inalienable, and indefeasible, are enforceable without implementing legislation, are among those rights reserved to the people, and are equivalent with all other inalienable rights. But I have 3 stars there because I want to highlight that this ending language is actually a portion of the amendment that is a bit in flux at this point. But now that we have that in your minds, I'm going to stop the screen share. I'm going to turn off my camera, and I'm going to turn the virtual podium over to Dave Pringle.
Awesome to be here. Thank you, Maya. You rock beyond my world. Before I talk about how we can move government officials and how to talk to them and all, just a quick introduction on myself. So I am based in New Jersey. My professional career has been 35 years of lobbying and public interest advocacy, the vast majority of which is environment, all of which is related to the environment, mostly in New Jersey and Trenton, but regionally and nationally too. I have family all over the Eastern Seaboard. My son lives in Groton right now. He's trying to buy a house there. So if you have any good tips, you Connecticut people, please keep me posted. And I'm a very fond veteran of 95 and 84, sometimes to get to Connecticut, to sometimes to get through it. But love Connecticut and know that y'all want the same thing in your constitution and for the environment that we do everywhere else. I'm kind of I call myself Maya's resident political hack, the progressive environmental lobbyist that kind of knows how to get things done, or at least attempts to get things done, because sometimes the powers that be are not, we shouldn't have to be here, right? We should have the right to clean air and clean water, and we don't, and we're here. And so I help try to navigate all of that. So how to talk to legislators. Legislators and politicians and elected officials and opinion leaders are complicated. But first and foremost, and I sometimes forget this too, they're people. They're real people. They care about stuff. They might not have exactly the same priorities as we all do. But they all of them got into this business for the right reasons. And it's, maybe not all of them. I would, maybe a certain presidential candidate did not, but anyway, I digress. The vast majority of them, especially at the legislative level, got into it for the right reasons to do the right things. And, reasonable people can disagree about, the definition of right. But I'm unaware of anybody who doesn't think that anybody shouldn't have the right to clean air, clean water, healthy environment, not be screwed by climate change, etc. And I'm less familiar with the particulars of the Connecticut amendment than I am the New Jersey amendment, but I know, the substance is the same. And I will say Green Amendment here, just a flag, just because that's what we're calling it here in New Jersey. Fully aware it's called the Environmental Rights Amendment in Connecticut, but it's difficult for me to have my left side of my brain work the same way as the right side of my brain. So when I say Green Amendment, for you Connecticut people, translate that to, Environmental Rights Amendment, etc. But it's one and the same, putting in the Constitution in a meaningful way, that, these fundamental principles that should have been there from day one are in fact in there. They're self-executing, etc. I'm less familiar with the Connecticut Constitution, but I know in New Jersey has the right to private property. in our Constitution, but we don't have the right to clean air and clean water. So in New Jersey, that means currently that, somebody upstream of me has a stronger position to pollute my well, or to do development that floods my property. And I have less say in that because I don't have the rights that they do. That's one of many reasons we really want to have this in our state constitutions. So I'm focusing here on how to talk to legislators, recognizing their people. Connecticut is you have your town meetings. You have the meetings happening in Hartford. The vast majority of legislators are very approachable. If you approach them in the right way, maybe it's setting up a meeting in advance with their legislative office. It can be, being in Hartford on a legislative day and grabbing them in the hallway, recognizing that when you're talking to them in the hallway, you're probably, you're going to be more likely to run into them. But you're only going to have a couple-minute conversation probably there. Whereas if you set up a meeting in the district, you can have a higher quality conversation. So you can talk to more legislators faster if you're in Hartford, but you can have more higher quality meetings if you go to the individual district. Couple tidbits when you're talking to legislators. You're not expected to know everything. The main thing you should be doing is making a connection to them. And New Jersey has 120 legislators. I can make a connection with every single one of them. How do you make that connection? The best idealist is, you're a constituent, you live in their district, so you can have that connection. But maybe you don't live in the district, but you work in the district, or maybe your family grew up there. I've just quickly, in Connecticut, I was kind of quickly brainstorming. I have family and personal connections to at least 20 different towns in Connecticut. So I'm not lobbying Connecticut right now, but there's at least 20 legislators in Lyme, in Litchfield, Waterbury, Westport, Groton, New London. I have a connection. So try to make a connection with them. That shows that, you're just, you can make a connection with them. And that matters a lot. And you don't have to be an expert. And none of us are. Maya asks me questions. I ask Maya questions. So we work together. So one of the best things when you're talking to legislators is, making that personal connection. Let them know you care. You obviously wouldn't be talking to them if you weren't. But when you do that and give them a chance to talk, hear them out, depending on the situation and the relationship, they might try to filibuster. So you want to be respectful and not cut them off, but don't let them go on forever, and try and bring it back to your point. They might, in a good situation, they will ask questions. If you know the answer, nail it, and bring it back to your basic point. If you don't know the answer to the question, that's okay. Don't lie. It sounds crazy, but I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation where I hear somebody exaggerating or kind of running off the cuff, and it just don't. I'm actually not sure about that, but my colleagues know the answer, and I will find out, and I'll get that information back to you. And when you do that, you're scoring a couple key points. You're demonstrating you're not a know-it-all, and they'll appreciate that. And when you get the answer, and you will get the answer between Maya and me and all the resources that we have, you are given, actually, it's a three-fer. You not only don't pretend to be a know-it-all, which they appreciate, you get the opportunity to talk to them again. you can follow up by email or a phone call or, whatever the appropriate communication or a follow-up meeting or whatever is. And then you deliver. You provide the information that they were asking for. So, you build relationships over time, whether it's asking them to co-sponsor the bill, whether it's, asking them to move the bill, have the bill up for a hearing, or to put it up for a vote, or what have you. And I'm mostly focusing on legislators here, but the same goes true to opinion leaders. Whether it be editorial writer in the newspapers or a reporter or what have you. Everything I'm talking about here, applies. Be a source of information. Nobody expects you to be a know-it-all. Be honest about that. Be able to follow up with folks that will impress them. It also helps you develop relationships, so that they'll, when you do weigh in with them in the future, it will matter more. You'll also become a source of information for them. They might follow up with you because, maybe it's on the Green Amendment or maybe it's on some other matter related to the environment, but they know that you're somebody that cares about these kinds of issues and you're a reliable source of information. So, with that, I think I'm good. Do we want to move on? Do we want to do questions? Should I turn it over to Nicole?
Let's turn it over to Nicole, and we'll be doing the Q&A. We can do a little short Q&A before the breakouts after Kim goes, and then we'll go to practice.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here because I've got some slides. So my name's Nicole Maestas Olanovich, she, her, hers. I'm currently on unceded Tiwa land here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I want to thank everyone for participating. I come at this a little bit, I want to be honest with everybody. We're talking about communicating with your legislators, and I don't ever think that there's a time, not in my life, that I haven't felt like I was going to vomit before I've done public speaking. And so I want to lead with saying that that's absolutely natural, right? David was saying that not only are our legislators human, we're very much human as well. And I really want to talk to you guys about the heart of storytelling. And a lot of times people really feel like, why would I give public comment? Why would I write to my legislator? Why would I, talk to my family member? Why would I try to build a coalition? Who cares about me? Who cares about my story? Who am I anyway, right? And I want to encourage you guys to all know that you have a story, that your lived experience, the way you view the world, is valuable. And your legislators are elected to reflect your voice, right? Here, we have a Spanish saying that your vote is your voice, right? And so it's really important that you share that voice with your legislators. And so I'm going to get right into how to tell an effective story. So I originally started my educational career getting two bachelors, one in psychology, the other in communication, because I want to be a child psychologist. And I figured if you can't figure out how to restate something to a child, you'll never be effective. And then life happened and I moved on and I got a master's in social work and a master's in business. And my social work is in government nonprofit, to be an advocate, to go to the roundhouse and to speak. So I was able to take my communications degree and really lift it up on a level that made me less afraid of public speaking. And so when you're telling a personal story, it's always important to remember that you should always have a linear story, right? You should have a very succinct beginning, middle, and end. If you're anything like me, you might run off on a little bit of a tangent in the middle, but I always bring it right back to what I was meaning to talk about and wanting to say. Effective storytelling also presents the person who is listening to you with very clear images, sights, sounds, even smells, right? And they should reveal what your motivations are, what your values are. And when I say that, I think about filling words, the things that are important to you, those motivators that are intrinsically important to you. And our story should always be connected to what our struggles are, what our goals are. And so again, you can have these kinds of skills and use them when you're talking to legislators, building coalitions, talking to friends, family, community members as well. And when we tell our stories to legislators, we want them to follow us. We want to guide them on like a mini story, whether it's that elevator speech of 30 seconds or 2 minutes, but they're short and they're memorable, right? And so I'm going to lead you through some of the elements to look for. When you're telling a story, right, you want the person to know what you're saying. You want to be able to have a root, which is what you're meaning to say, right? What the purpose that you're rooting your communication is. You want to be able to talk about things that are happening in your life or have happened in your life, both internally, emotionally, and externally, and exchange those stories. You want to share strategies, right? So, what your struggles are, what your wishes are, what your desires are, and how you guys can guide each other, right? What you're looking for the legislator to do, what the end is, right? What this piece of legislation will eventually lead to if it's passed, right? What it means to you. And then ask and create next steps. So we want to make sure that we have a strong ask. At the end of talking to legislators or anybody in a position of power, they should really leave that moment with you knowing that, well, that Nicole girl just came up to me and I know exactly what she wants. She wants me to pass, the environmental rights amendment, right? And in my state here in New Mexico, it's also called the Green Amendment. And I think at the core, it always comes down to being the Green Amendment. And one day we hope to have that on a national level. And so I'm going to give you guys an example. I didn't really lead with what my story was when I started talking to you guys because I wanted to use that in an example. And I want you to remember that these elements that I'm looking for here, right? That you should hear something, you should see something, it should be linear, you should be motivated after listening to me. And so I'm going to demonstrate for you what I would do if I was talking to one of the legislators here in New Mexico. And remember, here we call it also a Green Amendment, and we call it the Bill of Rights instead of the Declaration of Rights. So if you catch me saying one of those, just know here in my state, that is the difference. So my name is Nicole Maestas Olanovich. I am from New Mexico. My family predates statehood here in New Mexico. I support the Green Amendment, and I want you to support the Green Amendment in your state. I want you to vote for the Green Amendment, and I'll tell you why. When I was 17, I really wanted to go to college. I graduated high school a year early, but I come from a really poor family. My mom couldn't help me even if she wanted to. So I went online to find interesting ways to try to pay for college, and I was sucked in by the military. And I thought it wouldn't be a lot because it was just a guard reserve position, and 1 week a month, 2 weeks a year didn't really make a difference. But then I was deployed to Iraq immediately after basic training and tech school. When I was in Iraq, we had to drive by these burn pits where they would take our fecal matter, styrofoam, plastic, our trash, and they would pour jet fuel on it and light it on fire. Why? Because in 2004, you really couldn't dispose of your trash in war in a different way. And so every day I'm working downwind of these burn pits, within a mile of these burn pits. My 19-year-old body at this time is getting really, really sick. I end up throwing up what is like a neon green on the side of a bobtail. I go to the flight doctor, and the flight doctor tells me that I have to be put on quarters. Eventually, I'm told that the smoke from that burn pit has burnt my esophagus so bad that for the rest of my life, I have to be on medication. I have to be on medication to help me breathe, to stop me from getting heartburn, to further burn my esophageal passage. And so here I am in New Mexico, 1.5 miles away from my home that I grew up in. And that's something that our culture really does here in New Mexico. And I'm being told that the water that I'm drinking is negatively impacting my medication. They're countering each other. There's too many particulates per milliliter in my water. I also get these alarms on my phone that tell me that the recycling center downwind from my house is on fire again. And I'm having to breathe in that air, and I'm getting warnings telling me not to go outside and breathe that air. And oddly enough, by this recycling center, there's an asphalt plant that keeps getting proposed by this recycling center that keeps lighting on fire. And if you know anything about asphalt, asphalt is highly flammable. And I think it's wrong that my family home has become a sacrifice zone for big development. And the Green Amendment would remedy this. It would stop bad actors from coming into already highly polluted areas and would protect individuals like me who already have a health condition, or my daughter who's an infant who doesn't have a health condition but shouldn't be subjected to an environmental climate that's going to negatively impact her in the future. So for those reasons and many more, I highly, highly encourage you to vote in favor of the Green Amendment. Thank you. And so that's my example, right? Now, the debrief on that. In hearing my story, what values did you hear that I have? What images did you see in the story that I told you? What do you think my motivation for talking to you was? What do you think I can improve on, right? And mostly, what was effective about what I said, right? And so you are more than welcome to put anything into the chat that you might have seen, heard, felt, right? And I think it's really important to always be open to hearing things that can be improved upon. Because I know, like me, sometimes like I said, I branch out, but I always come back, right? But having that willingness to improve on your statement makes it easier the next time and the next time, or if people say, this was the one thing that I heard that really hit me, right? And so people heard about my service, they heard about my sacrifice, they heard of green vomit, right? That'll really hit you, real, deep, raw, collective. Those are all really important things, bettering myself. And so those are things that legislators hear, right? And they have to go home, whether or not they got into the position that they're in for intrinsic reasons or selfish reasons, or to actually uplift the voice of people around them. My voice will echo in their head, whether they vote for or against it. And a quote that was told to me a really long time ago is that people will come for all different reasons. And in this case, they're legislators, right? So they're there to get whatever they're wanting to do done. But they'll stay for you. They'll remember you. They'll listen to that public comment and they'll think, if she's able to talk about those things, if she's able to self-disclose some really difficult things in order for everybody to collectively have a better environment, then maybe I can too, right? And so always remember that the people will come for all different reasons, community concerns, public comment, but they will stay for you. And so I'm really looking forward to having some breakout groups with you guys, because I think it's really important to really empower each other on how to give public comment, how to get over those hurdles, and really practice those elevator speeches. And quite frankly, here's some of the ridiculous things legislators will say to try to stonewall and stymie you, and really great ways to work around the different nuances of getting your point across, of getting your story across, and standing resolute in what you have to say. And so thank you guys all for being here, and I can't wait to talk to you guys in the breakout rooms. Maya?
Yeah, and next we're going to have Kim come on camera and talk a little bit about some specifics about how things are advancing in Connecticut, which is going to be important information as you talk with governmental leaders and others about this.
Hi, everybody. I have a bad cold, so you're going to hear my Lauren Bacall voice here. The situation in Connecticut is we last legislative session, we got the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment introduced, and by Representative Mary Mashinsky, which was wonderful. And we got a public hearing. We had a lot of good support. We collected a lot of support from a lot of organizations. We have about 42 organizations that have signed on to support the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment. But that's as far as we got. We just got to a public hearing. It was never brought to a vote in the Environment Committee. So we were advised to try a different committee. So we're going to try the Government Administration and Elections Committee, which has to pass this anyway, because it's an amendment to it's actually a resolution for an amendment to the Constitution to go onto the ballot. So they have a role in that. So we have a petition. I'll put that in the chat. We have a petition to go to the co-chairs of the Government Administration Elections Committee, May Flexer and Matt Blumenthal. May Flexer has been interested in bringing this forward, but I'm not sure at this point what's going on, and we would like to get a meeting with her and make sure that we can get get her, her on board and make sure that she approves all the text and all that kind of thing. So that petition, which many of you have probably already signed, goes to those co-chairs. We are also working now on a letter to your individual legislators. So this is a chance for you to tell your story in a letter to your own legislators. And I just put that in the chat. Today I was supposed to be at, but couldn't go because I have my cold, but I was listening to the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters Environmental Summit. And Christine Palm, one of the legislators, said, if a legislator gets like 10 emails from constituents, that's huge. That's like a major wave. So writing a letter to your own legislator and getting other people in your community in their district to do the same is a really great opportunity to move the needle forward and get a legislator on board, because so few people are paying attention to what's going on at the state legislative level, that if you are just able to get like 10, 15 people to write to the legislators, tell your own story. So one of the things at the top of this is to like tell your story, and then here are some talking points about the CTERA. If you can get 10 or 15 people to do that, that will make a huge difference. And I think I'm going to pass it on at this point. I've barely got any voice left.
That was great. Thank you so much, Kim, for making it through. And those were really great points, and we heard every one of them. And thanks, Dave, for that great advice about how to approach leaders as real people, and Nicole for taking us through how you really make an impactful and impassioned communication to whomever you're talking to. And then Kim, the importance of doing that verbally, but also doing that in writing, and that there are ways to do both. So we're about to go to our breakouts, but I was just following the chat. There are a couple of questions. Some of them are substantive. And I think what I'd like to do is hold those substantive questions. For example, Gabriella's question about how the New Jersey Green Amendment and the environmental justice legislation that was recently passed in New Jersey, how those two movements have interacted. That's more substantive. I don't think really relevant to the practice. So I'm going to hold off on that kind of question until after the breakouts. But there was one question, and I hope Dave and Nicole, you'll both come on camera, because one or both of you may have some good advice on this. And I have heard this in other trainings, so I don't think that this is unique to Ev. Ev's thought or point or question is that for him, he's really about climate policy, as opposed to having the kind of deeply personal story that you, Nicole, for example, change. And so he says, but I'm about climate policy without a personal story. So how would you help guide Ev to take his climate policy care and turn that into a personal story? And why don't we start with Dave, and then we'll go to Nicole.
All right. you have a story. And I'm a policy wonk myself. And I'm like, just do the right thing. It's so blatantly obvious, right? But for a variety of reasons, some more legitimate than others, that's not how legislators think and operate. So, you know, I'm a, means to an end kind of guy. So, they're going to be moved by your story about you. For my story, I'm a 50-something empty nester. I bang my head up against the wall. I mostly spend my time lobbying in Trenton. I bang my head up against the wall with these legislators repeatedly not doing the right thing for 35 years. And there are times I want to give up. And why don't I give up? And often it's I look in the mirror, and if not me, who? And why am I doing it? It's because of my kids and my grandkids and whatever. So I don't want to prejudge whether you have kids or grandkids or whatever, but if you do, that can be part of your story. You benefited from the past, and you want to bring it forward to the future. So you have a story, Ev, and you might want to be the policy wonk, but you also want to move the legislator. So you got to figure out a way to combine the two.
Yeah, and I would add that, not everybody's going to have grandchildren or children, or, have been harmed by environmental toxins. A lot of us have, a lot of us don't know about it. But I think that, something that I was taught early on in my MBA, right, when I was working at the Roundhouse as an intern, is that there are about 50% of the people who are bleeding heart, and they'll hear that kind of story. And then some want to get to like the meat and potatoes. Like, what does this mean in terms of cost benefit? What does this mean in terms like, how is this going to impact our revenue? What's a return on investment? Like those kind of nitty gritties. And so if that's your story, if you have done the research and you can look at this and say, well, so for example, New Mexico, if we are actually slated to be, we are prime, like BlackRock wants to come into New Mexico and put down solar arrays because they're not as hot as Arizona to where they degrade so fast. We are the perfect climate. We have over 300 days of the year of sun and not rain or weather, right? Except today we got rain, thank God. But so they want to come in and take over. So part of this argument for the Green Amendment in that kind of perspective is saying, look at the benefits that our state can have, right? Instead of having schools that are downwind of these wells, instead of having these mineral mines that are polluting the water of these communities, instead of having these elementary schools that are within yards be supplying the whole state of California and ourselves with renewable clean energy. And that is another kind of story that you could tell. And in that, you can see the dollars and cents, and those dollars and cents will stick with them. So it's really important to always be imaginative, no matter what your point of view is. If you don't feel you want to self-disclose your story, or if you personally don't feel like you have one, though I would encourage you that most likely you do, but I hope that has shed a little light on that.
Yeah. And then the final thing that I'm going to add, Ev, and then we're going to have one other question and then we'll go to breakout. And I think that Nicole alluded to it. Your story could be somebody else's story, a poignant story you read in the press, right? About somebody who's being impacted by climate change, about the wildfires and how that's impacting communities in other states or other right? Your story can be something you read in the press, something you read in a book, something you heard your neighbor tell. So the idea is to have that heart connection, or, maybe that economics. And for some people, economics, that is not just intellectual, it's about the heart. So, that's, as Nicole said, that's a different way of telling the story. So think about your stories, think about other people's stories, think about the stories that might connect for a legislator, something that happened in their community. And that's how you can tie a bow on it. One other thing that there's one other question I think we want to get to. And I'm going to ask our facilitators, maybe practice this in the breakout. Dave, you got off camera, but you better get on for this one, I suspect. But let's try to handle this one pretty quickly so we can get to our breakouts, because we're having a great time, but we want to get to that. Mary would like to have an example of how you handle a legislator who cuts you off. So why doesn't somebody share some insights on that? And then in the breakouts, legislators, cut off the people who are talking to you.
I'll lead on that. So as an intern, and I was working with the National Association of Social Workers, that happened all the time. I think that there's different ways that you can go about it. One of the out of the box ways that I went about it is I actually made friends with his wife. His wife was always with him during the legislative session, and I reported back. A lot of times they'll say, I've got to go. I've got a whole bunch of other stuff going on, right? And so you make a plan, and it's, a metaphor, but it is meaningful. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? I think that a long time ago, legislators realized that if they didn't respond to my email, I was going to email them again. I was going to show up. I was going to go to their office. I was going to leave my business card with my phone number. I was going to try again until they at least gave me my 30 seconds in the elevator, right? That 30-second spiel, at least until I saw that they had responded, not one of their secretaries had responded to an email. And I think that kind of builds it a little bit more, is that saying, all right, I understand, I respect your time. When is a better time to connect with you? What would be a better time to talk? And then being there, there's been times that I've sat outside of legislators' offices for 2 hours when they're like, I'll get with you in a minute. And then 2 hours later, I'm still there. And it really makes a point that your voice is important and you'll be heard. Another way to go outside of the box, if let's say this legislator isn't in your district, right, is finding folks in their districts, like Kim said. Same in New Mexico. We are a very large state, a really small population, minority majority state. If they get 10 emails from their actual constituents in their zip code, they are like, what is going on? The world is on fire. And right now, everybody in New Mexico is up for re-election. So they are really listening. And because I've ran for office before, there's always this fear of, oh my God, she'll run against me, even if she's going to lose. And so there's all kinds of different variations of ways of building a small coalition of people within their district, of getting back to them, of waiting, of respecting their time, and making it a point to say, well, I do want to make sure that I get to talk to you before, and then set a time, right? I do want to make sure I get to talk to you before the end of this week. I do want to make sure that I get to talk to you about getting this on the schedule before your next committee. And really being motivated to stick to your guns on whatever you say, even if you do feel like you're the squeaky wheel.
And Dave, how would you say people should deal with the legislator that cuts you off?
I want Nicole by my side. Couple additional thoughts. Obviously, it depends on the circumstance. Are you running into them in the hallway and they're saying, I don't have time right now, versus are they in the middle of a 30-minute meeting with you and they're cutting you off? So, you obviously have to read the audience and the situation. But, the basic is, you be respectful, don't let them filibuster, and have an end game. So if you're running into the hallway, you probably didn't expect to get them to say, Eureka, you're absolutely right. I'm going to do everything you said moving forward from now on. So you knew there was going to need to be some kind of follow-up anyway. So make sure that there's an agreed upon follow-up. Often, if it's in a hallway conversation, they probably have an aide with them. Make sure you get the aide's name, get their card, give them your card or a flyer. And try to get so we're going to meet, and then you can, or if you're with the individual legislator and they say, oh yes, call my staff, and so now you call your staff, and that might be punting on their end, but it's, even if it is punting on their end, you ran into legislator X and he said to follow up with you, James, or Susan, or whoever staff is, so when are we going to meet, or whatever. So that kind of follow-up matters a lot. And it also depends on the urgency. Like if you're lobbying them in the hallway because the vote's going to be in 3 minutes, you're going to be more assertive. Like, no, I'm sorry, this can't wait. You're going to be voting in 10 minutes. But, if it's, if they're a difficult legislator to deal with, and you're not likely to get a eureka moment immediately, and the vote isn't in 5 minutes, you're building a relationship, so you can be, more, you can be more diplomatic in following up in the future. It doesn't have to be right now.
Great. Thank you for that great advice from both of you. Okay, now everybody, Peter's going to break you up into 3 breakout rooms. We're going to leave you in the breakout rooms. The intent is 20 minutes, but Nicole, Molly, David, if for some reason it seems like things are wrapping up sooner, send me a text message. We can always bring people back a few minutes earlier because we have.
Do you want to set folks up for their expectations for the breakout room? Or
yes, I can certainly reiterate it.
Okay.
Remember, when you go into this, you are in the legislative halls in Connecticut. You are trying to advocate a legislator you saw, or perhaps an agency representative. Maybe you saw the governor, right? Some sort of governmental leader, and you want to pitch them about why the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment is important and worthy of their support. And our facilitators, Molly and David and Nicole, are going to be those governmental leaders. So they're going to be in character the whole time. They might cut you off. They might ask hard questions. You've been given good advice on how to answer questions, even if you don't know the answer. So just try to practice, have fun with it. And when we come back, we'll get advice from Molly and Nicole and from David to sort of how people did and things they saw, and give some useful advice in response. And then maybe we'll have some extra time for some of the substantive questions that have come up. But otherwise, we might have a 3rd training that'll dig back into all that stuff later. All right, Peter, break everybody up. Welcome back, everybody. So glad you're back. We did bring you back a few minutes early because in order to honor the 8 o'clock end time, but also to be able to get the feedback from everybody, we felt like we needed to bring you back a few minutes early. So with that, I'm just going to jump in. And why don't we go Molly, because she hasn't spoken yet. We could go Molly and then Nicole and David with just a little bit of feedback from the facilitators, feedback, advice, thoughts, ideas, in just a minute or few. Molly?
Sure. So apologies to my group because I wasn't paying attention to the time. So we were just getting into it. But I heard a lot of great points being raised by my group. I think that even though Ev said that he didn't have a personal story, I still think that his pitch was compelling, and I think it speaks to coming armed with data points and statistics for your meeting. If you're feeling like you don't have a personal story, why don't you arm yourself with some facts and figures that you could bring up? Maybe it goes with doing research about who you're meeting with too. Are they interested in education? Why don't you bring about some facts about children and the impacts that this would have on children? Are they concerned about the economy? Then bring some points about the economic impacts, positive impacts. So that was one takeaway I had. But I think everybody has a good grasp on what this is, and I think I have confidence in this group with the meeting with their stakeholders and their legislators, and they're already kind of doing the advocacy that we're talking about without realizing it.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Nicole?
So we addressed a couple of things, like the feeling that legislators are maybe not telling the whole truth when they say they didn't hear from anyone, when you know that a lot of people have showed up, right? And so encouraging to make sure that you BCC or CC the Green Amendment movement so that you have that kind of documentation that they are being connected with. I think another good point was brought up is that there's other environmental laws on the book, and what does the Green Amendment mean to those other environmental laws, which I said I'm going to answer some of, but I'll leave some to you, Maya, because this is something we've discussed, that there can be different environmental laws. But again, when you just have these little various laws that still have to be enforced by the courts and enforced by legislators, what you do when you have a green amendment is you actually have something stronger. It's in the Declaration of Rights, right? And so it actually empowers and encourages those little bitty laws, but there's something even more strong that you have in a green amendment. And the third, probably, that some of you guys might be facing that we talked about is what happens when your legislator has been totally supportive, right? There's not anything you could really say to them. They've been supportive. And I would encourage you guys all to still write them when you guys are doing doing calls to action, because a lot of the chairs of committees, a lot of the whips that are getting the votes, or people who are putting the bill on the calendar, ask people in the committees how many people have emailed you on this. And so it's important, even when you do have an ally, to give them support and to thank them so that they have something tangible to say, look, my constituents are here, my constituents are still pushing for this. So until my constituents back down, I'm not going to back down. And so those are three of the topics that we really talked about.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nicole. Hey, and Ev, thanks for the plug for the book, that it was a good resource for you. David?
Yeah, so we might have spent a little too much time in introductions, but I think it was really good because folks were nervous and kind of like, I don't really have a story to tell. But like when I heard their introductions of themselves, I'm like, that's their story. So I think you need to give more credit to yourselves. We did a couple elevator speeches, and folks talked in the introduction about, growing up in Lake Erie and seeing fish die. Well, you're now an adult in Long Island and you're concerned about the fish there. I think it was Mary that said, I'm not free if I don't have clean air and clean water, or something to that effect. Very powerful for me. Folks were concerned, even being nervous in this role play, and they'd be even more nervous in talking to a legislator, even though in my group, it sounds like at least a good chunk of our folks already know their legislators or whatever. Again, they work for you. You don't work for them. You probably know more about this than they do. And even if you are nervous, and even if that comes across, that's genuine and that's powerful. So be who you are. We didn't talk about we cut off at the very end there, but whenever possible, especially if sometimes you're going to randomly run into somebody at the supermarket, you probably aren't going to have a Green Amendment flyer on you. But like if you're at the State House, have something to physically give them, your name and contact information. One, so they in the off chance they're willing to follow up on their own, they will. Be it helps them, they heard it verbally, they've gotten it physically, maybe they'll see the flyer again, maybe they'll pass it around to their, staffer, maybe it will get Chuck, but again, the more options you have, the better. And then the last thing is just to always make sure you have an ask, and that there's a way to move forward. So, if the vote's up right now, the ask is, need you to vote yes. And, will you vote yes? And if it's, if you have more time, it's you obviously, especially if it's a quickie, if it's not a district meeting, or even if it is a district meeting, you want to have okay, it was nice. It was a nice conversation. Never going to see you again. No. How are we following up? When can we hear back from you? Or when are we going to meet? Or, what have you? Good work.
Great.
I think Connecticut is well in hands.
So we only have a few minutes left. We had 2 questions in the chat that were left unanswered. If anybody has a thought or question that came up during the breakout, and you want to put it in the chat, but I thought let's get to these 2 questions because I think they may be helpful to folks, and folks are eager for answers. So Dave, I'm actually going to give this one to you. This is from Gabriella, and she mentions how New Jersey had passed some very strong environmental justice legislation and implementing regulations recently. And she's asked how the New Jersey Green Amendment movement has intersected with that environmental justice movement.
So it's an awesome law. I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit because I helped get it done. It's the nation's strongest environmental justice law. It, for the first time, allows the DEP in New Jersey to deny permits under certain circumstances because those communities are already polluted too much. It's awesome. As awesome as it is, it's fatally flawed. It's not nearly strong enough. Lots of, we had to settle for a ton of compromises that if we had a Green Amendment, at minimum, we never would have had to accept those compromises. And frankly, if we had a Green Amendment, we wouldn't have to spend the last 20 years fighting for this law.
Perfect answer. So the other question, I'm not sure if Kim is still on, but I'm going to, I'll grab this in the interest of time. And if Kim, if you're on and you want to add to it, you can pop back on camera. This question is from Diane, and she says, if Connecticut amendments, if the Connecticut language, Connecticut's amendment language is amended, do we have to advise all of our supporters? And I will just say, you don't have to advise them, but it's going to be smart strategy, right? Because your supporters are part of the community of activists, whether in writing or verbally. So you and we, the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment Alliance, Green Amendments for the Generations, and all the organizations that are a part of this movement will certainly, if there is an amendment to the language, will work hard to make sure we spread that word far and wide, because that will help support ongoing engagement and advocacy, and perhaps even encourage people to engage again. Maybe they had talked and they stepped back. Now they'll be encouraged to come back out because there'll be some good positive adjustment. I noticed you used the word, do we have to let people know? I just want to say, of course, you don't have to let them know. Like I said, strategically, it's smart. But we have to remember, in the final analysis, the decision about whether or not to amend Connecticut's constitution is going to lie in the hands of the people. And the people are going to be given that verbiage and asked whether or not they want to vote in support of it. So everybody, your supporters and everyone beyond, will ultimately see that language when they're making their own determination about whether or not to vote for it. Oh, Kim, you've popped back on. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I would just say, if in fact the language gets changed, that's probably a sign of progress. That means that we've gotten our legislative champion on board and approving the language. So, and we want to make sure that we let all of our supporters know when we get a big piece of progress like that. So we would want to let everybody know.
Yeah. And if there was a proposed modification that undermined the amendment and actually transformed it from a Green Amendment to just pretty language that didn't really make a difference, well, we would make sure that we told you that as well, because that's not something that we want to fight for. So positive progress, we will scream it from the rooftops. If there's problematic progress, we'll scream it from the rooftops as well, because then we're going to have to all double down to get that fixed. Because we can't afford to have something that's not as a true Green Amendment passed for Connecticut or for any state, frankly. It's just not helpful. It's not worth the time. So we would rather circle back next year and get a true Green Amendment in the end. So we are at 7:57. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. So that's great. We're going to be able to wrap up on time. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank our speakers. I want to thank our facilitators. And I want to thank all of you for being such powerful, passionate advocates.
Thank you all.